Ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk to you about a very important RTS principle and concept. I have a replay example case here for you, and the situation that we're highlighting is when to completely abandon a base. So this is a Zerg versus Terran game, and Terran, like Protoss, has a lot of really good 2-base all-ins. One thing that people ask about a lot is Marine tank all-ins. And fortunately enough, I have a example game for you here where I go up to 4 bases against an opponent who doesn't even have a 3rd base when they attack me. So the early game is pretty normal, pretty standard. They did make a mistake and lose the Reaper early, but then they're marching out on the map with some Hellions. So I'll just take you through my vision and my thought process this game, because so far this early game is pretty normal. Nothing really stands out. Reaper into Hellion. And the next key decision that the Terran has that I don't have a scout of is they're making another barracks here instead of getting a 3rd CC really early. A lot of times Terran will go 1-1-1 into a 3rd orbital, and then they'll land this 3rd orbital really fast, and then they have tons of minerals of income for bio over time. But this is a different build. This is a build that gets more production early. So these 2 barracks could have been an orbital command, but they got a Viking to be able to deny the scout of that. So you can't just Sloverlord scout in a lot of times with the Viking. So what do I do to be safe? I go for a ton of drones early, a lot of queens. So I'm making queens and drones mainly. I just have a few lings to help block the Hellions if they try to dive. But my main goal right now is to watch the minimap and have the queens either on this side to block the Hellions or on this side. The nice thing about this as a method is I basically make sure that if the Hellions do choose to yeet into my drone lines, the queens are going to apply 6 queens of DPS, and that'll usually kill like 2 of the Hellions before they even get to my base. So the key thing there is to have some of these spotter overlords that extend your vision out in front a little bit, which gives you more time to make sure your queens are on the right side. So these queens should basically kind of be bouncing back and forth here to block whatever these Hellions are doing. So we'll kind of go through this mid game as I'm droning up. I played a whole bunch of practice games with Jeffe, who is a top GM Terran. He beats me basically every time, but the cool thing is it helps me really improve the speed of my own play, and it challenges me to try to squeeze out more drones earlier on. Because one of the really powerful aspects of Zerg is their ability to make not just 1 worker per town hall, but we can make an injected hatchery worth of drones at a time. So that's really where Zerg can be very strong. So I'm trying to drone up here. I'm getting a nice drone lead on my opponent. Whenever I have approaching 3 base mineral, I go for that 4th base. You should really not be scared to take a base. The base that you take is kind of like a shield for yourself. A hatchery has 1,500 hit points with 1 armor. So if they're shooting your 4th base, that's not really a bad thing. They could be shooting your drones instead. So 430 lair and a Bane nest, and then when lair is done, Bane speed is the next gas investment. And you might be wondering, well, what about 1-1? If you take 1-1 upgrades and then Bane speed, what does that afford you? You can get a really strong 2-2 power spike for your upgrades, but if they go for any like really YOLO 2-base timing, you're just dead. So if you're unsure if the Terran is playing greedy or aggressive, this is a super good upgrade to take. One thing that Jeffe was saying was the way that top Zergs would feel unkillable to him early on is when they have speed Banes on creep. They push creep really hard, and then speed Banes on creep are just super violent and dangerous. And then you get the 1-1 upgrades after that. So I get my macro hatch, I have my 4th base. I don't really have a scout right now, but in a minute here I'm going to send out some lings just to assess. Do you have a 3rd base? And if so, why not? So I'm droning up here. My droning can be better, but I am still ahead. I'm at 62 against 46. And now I'm sending out some lings on the map. I just told 2 lings to patrol like 1 here and then 1 here to see if there's going to be a base. And lo and behold, we have Marines running at me across the map, and there's no third base here. This is usually the third that Terrans take, but I also have vision of this third here. So what does that mean for me? It means that this base, it's probably not going to last, and that's fine. I'll show you you could say this is crisis management. So I sent my spotterlings, and now I know that it's a 2-base all-in. We'll just give you a peek of what their base actually looks like at this point. They've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 barracks, and they don't have a third CC yet. And this is 1 engineering bay. This is a pretty common build. They go 1 NG bay, they make an extra round of big production instead of taking a command center. And then they try to push you at a key spot, like they're gonna probably siege up some tanks or whatever up against this wall. So their push is getting set up here. I'm getting my spores in the main in case there's a doom drop. I'm getting my 1-1 from the Evo. I inject the space. Fill my gases. And I want to make sure my queens stay alive. So if we're thinking about priorities of what you want to save, your drones are probably the most precious and important to keep alive. Your areas between your 1, 2, 3 bases are really important to control. And then you want to make sure you always have your core group of queens. If you ever lose these creep queens, it's going to be a very bad match for the rest of the game. So I would much rather give up this hatchery than give up my queens. Because the queens are gaining value over time, and they can help in later fights. Hatcheries, they can be a buffer of health, but they don't really fight stuff. So they're setting up here at a really annoying spot. My Bane speed is done. So you can have Bane speed in time to deal with 2-base all-ins. And what does the Terran want? The Terran wants to get to a really annoying position and set up this kind of crap. A lot of Zergs would just attack into this. And they'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm getting all in. I need to fight this. This is a shit fight for Zerg. Because the Banes have to roll all the way around this off creep to get over to this side. And these medevacs can just pick these up over the chasm and then drop them here by the tank. So this is a really bad situation for me to try and take this base. But what can I do? I can say, okay, good job, dude. You did a 2-base all-in. I'm going to take this as my 4th now. So what I do is I'm just droning up a little bit. If you're defending something like this, you can just add speed banes. You don't really need a ton of lings. And the Marines and the tanks, they can't really push into my 3rd right now. Those tanks are pretty stuck where they are. They can help zone out that 4th base location, but they're very far from this other one. So I just took this base, and then I rebind my camera location here to be my 4th base camera. I just pivoted, and I said, okay, this is no longer my 4th base. It's been killed, but I got some value from it. This is now my 4th base, and then whenever they leave, this will be my 5th base. So it's just a bit of an adjustment here. If I attacked with my army into this and took a really bad trade, then they can push forward into me and then start fighting here. But because I didn't even choose to trade with them, they're just kind of like, okay, we killed the hatchery, now we go home? Because they can't push into creep against speedbanes. So what I did was I sent all of my lings, which wasn't a ton, is 33. I just sent all of them at their natural. And then I kept all of my Banes at home. So Banes and Queens at home defend, Lings go attack. And look at this super exposed rally point. Terrans do this all the time. They establish a forward pushing position, and then they just rally their production at you. And a lot of times it works because the Zerg takes a bad trade into a really nasty tank position like this. But I just refused to take that fight. I said, nope. You can kill that hatch. I don't care. I'm taking this hatch instead. So I get in some damage. I didn't really kill a ton of workers here, but I forced their army to go back home, which means that me mining on 76 workers is just putting me further and further ahead. I'm going for 1-1, and then I'll get 2-2 after that. And the game is mostly over now. They're not really going to have enough steam because they didn't really get an advantage from their 2-base all-in. They forced me to take a different 4th base location, but that's fine. I have so much income right now I have multiple bases that are injected. Basically all my bases are injected. And I'm retaking this base. And I can choose to fight or not. And just use this mounting advantage for myself. So I'll just zoom through the rest of it. Basically, if Zerg gets ahead of Terran, and they did a 1 engineering bay build, whenever you get to 2-2, you can just kill them. If the defense was this clean. So the key takeaway from this point here is you want to make sure your opening build is safe. And you know what your adjustment is against 2 base all-ins. And then the main take-home is be okay with letting a base fall and just pivoting to the opposite direction. And make that your new 4th base. A lot of these fights, the Zergs are like, I don't know how to beat that. You're not supposed to. You're not supposed to engage it. They want you to fight at a certain time in a certain place, but you don't have to. You can say, all right, we commend the soul of this hatchery to the Hive cluster, and we will take our business elsewhere. This has been a public service announcement for the Zergs who don't know how to engage Marine tank, and they don't realize that you're not supposed to. In certain cases, you just go somewhere fucking else. Thank you. Don't forget to scout.